We are really passionate about this topic, and I know finances and this sort of conversation can be really taboo in British culture. I don't know about you, but I really struggled to be honest with friends, kind of what my finances were like. But the last few years I've actually been, prompted by the Holy Spirit, I think, just to be a bit more open with how Rich and I manage our finances, and also just seeking out people who I think are good at it. I've sort of, I've seen generous people in the church, and I've had to just get alongside them. How do you be generous like that? Or budgeting. So I approached we approached James last year because he's really good at budgeting. And I just thought, actually, as a family, do we talk about this and do we learn from each other? So we kind of wanted to open the conversation. So why this series? Well, we're all living in a very expensive city, aren't we? So money is going to feature in our day-to-day, and Jesus wants us to be full of faith in our day-to-day with our money and using our resources for his kingdom. So when Rich and I first came to London, we were unemployed, we had no money, we survived on money from gifts from our wedding day. So we have been in seasons where we really were in need, and just having to literally believe God for our meals every day. And then since working, God has brought us on a journey of just wisdom and learning how to steward, and we're still learning. So we're by no means perfect in what we do. We're learning along with you, but we trust that God's really going to do some amazing stuff amongst us as we look at his word and his Bible and what it says. So we want to look at the Bible. We want to learn how to steward faithfully. We want to open up conversations in the church. We want to share testimonies, so we're having testimonies. And we want to share ideas and tips. And also, just a caveat, one of the trustees said I need to make clear that this is not financial advice. This is opening God's word, seeing what the word says about finances. And we do encourage you to get a professional financial advisor, whether you have a lot or a little, just to see how you can manage your money better.
Amazing, thanks Tanika. So just to say, this is really informal. It's great that we've got a good number of people on today, but a lot of what we're going to be doing is in breakout groups, maybe groups of 3 or 4, to talk about what we're kind of collectively looking at today. I have to apologise, we've got a very short lead, so I'm going to have to, and I ain't got a clicker, so I'm going to be doing this a lot. Well, that should So basically what we're going to do is we're going to have a quick look at what we're doing over the next this is a 3-part series over the next 3 months, and excuse the kind of piggy bank and house money is about far more than those things, but this was a template I found online. So first up, today you'll see that we like our alliteration here. This session is faith-filled foundation, so we're going to be looking at what does the Bible say about a whole range of things in the area of finance. There's more on that as we go. And as I say, breakout groups, so we want you guys to do a lot of the talking. And then there's going to be a little panel discussion at the end. There's probably only going to be about 15 minutes for that one, but in the 3rd session in July, we're going to have much more of a detailed panel discussion about some of the stuff that might come out in these first 2 sessions. So the second one, sticking with the alliteration, is money management. 25th of June, this one is a closer look at some of the things from a practical perspective that we'll be looking at from a more, theological and biblical perspective today. So it'll be kind of much more hands-on. What does it look like to budget today? What does it look like to save? Do we save? How do we save? If we don't have a lot of money, what does that look like to save? If we have a lot of money, what does that look like to save or to invest? And all of the wonderful things like that, and pensions and everything else. We'll be drawing on the expertise collectively within Rev. One of the things that we've noticed, being part of a vibrant church in London, is that there's a whole range of experience. So there'll be people in the church that are very experienced in some of these areas, and not so much, and we want to be able to share that collectively. And then finally, future finances. 16th of July, as I said, this session is going to be tailored according to what comes out in the first 2 sessions here. So Tanika and I, we've not really got any idea what that's going to be about, but if there's a kind of a collective desire that kind of comes about from the first 2 sessions, a particular area we're looking more detail, that, just to make sure that what we're kind of looking at is relevant to the church and where we're at now. The question that we were going to ask was something along the lines of... Second?
Can we do the questions without them?
We can do it, yeah, absolutely. So we'll do the question. The idea was going to be, what does the word money mean to you? If you think about the word money, what are the words that come to mind? And what was going to happen is that you would have, say, 3 words that you can type in, and we were going to have a nice little word cloud, so that we could see the ones that are more popular in terms of what's typed in would come kind of bigger on screen. So obviously we won't do that, but I guess at this point maybe just shout out some of the words that kind of come to mind when we say money, and there could be anything from scary, in terms of how you feel, or kind of more practical things like spreadsheets or banks. So anybody, feel free to kick off.
Vehicle.
Second? Vehicle.
Possibility.
Possibility. Cash. Expensive. Necessary.
Exciting.
Exciting. There's a theme with Pete's ones.
Just now.
Needs. Possibilities. Managing.
Corrupt.
Wow, very good.
Yes,
Bills. Amazing. What? I love it when this works, because what that's done is, straight away we can see that there are some very positive things that come out, and also some slightly negative things. The alliteration continues throughout this, so we've got scriptures. We've got 2 actually. So the first one, somebody want to read out on screen if you can, or if you've got a Bible near you, Matthew 6:24. Anybody want to?
I'll do it. This one.
Do you want to do that?
So no one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money.
Amazing, thank you. And then the next one, Proverbs 10, verse 4. And this, I've got the NIV version here, which I'll read out just in case. So I think we mostly use ESV at Rev, so I'll read this one. It says, "Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth." So, in terms of the reason why I kind of wanted to pick these 2 verses out, and there's a whole load of things in the Bible that you could have picked out in terms of money, is that these 2 kind of in many ways sit alongside each other in kind of slightly strained place at first glance. The first one is very much around making money an idol, it kind of implies, if you read it kind of at face value, that maybe there's something inherently bad about money. Doesn't say that, but that's a way that you could look at it at first. And then the second one suggests, from the fact that it says diligent hands bring wealth, that money can be a good thing. So I wanted just to think about that first, because how do those 2 things live together? I think the key thing also just to highlight with the Proverbs one is that it's not saying that if you don't have a lot of money it's because you're lazy. I think it's very important to say that. And it's not saying that if you work really hard you'll get wealthy. But what it's saying across both of these is that money in and of itself is not a bad thing. So we've got to look a bit deeper at what that might look like. And that brings us on to the first bit of breakout. I'd love us to get into groups of maybe 3 or 4. Feel free to move chairs around. So probably easier to do with where you're sat. But again, if you're sat with family members and you want to kind of split up and move around a bit, please feel free to do that as well. The first question that we're going to have a look at is, in an expensive city with rising living costs, what does it look like to live according to those 2 scriptures? We've got some other things that we wanted to have a look at as well, in terms of kind of digging a bit deeper about what these things mean before we get into that. One is, working diligently to earn money. Diligently means, working with care and dedication. Taking a really kind of caring and kind of placing importance on our approach to work, I think is a very good thing. What does it mean to do that in our lives? Proverbs 12:11 says, "Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread, but he who follows worthless pursuits lacks sense." We'll come on to some of that as we look in the future of this session around investing as well. I think some other key things to be thinking about before we go into the breakout are around the love of money as opposed to money in and of itself. So we looked at that first one about serving two masters. In 1 Timothy 6:10 it says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils. It is through this craving that some have wandered away from the faith and pierced themselves with many pangs." I think that's really important because, as I say, that money in and of itself, in many ways, has no power. It's just the words necessity came up quite a lot, possibility, all of these things are very important. But it's about the fact that we're not to set our hopes on money, we're not to crave financial wealth. Those things may come in our lives, but they're things that we shouldn't put set our hearts on. And there are a couple more things. We're to be generous with what God has given us, whether that is with little or with a lot. And we all know the very famous story of the widow's mite, where she gave very little in monetary terms, but actually gave all she had, and that was a generous heart that she demonstrated. And then finally, we're to be content with what God has blessed us with. And at this point, I wanted to read a little story. If I can find my phone, it's probably in my pocket. This is quite a well-known one. I'm going to read it out rather than trying to wing it because there's a lot of detail in the written version of this. Is quite a famous story, so apologies if this is something that you've seen before. But there's a lot of detail that I don't want to miss out, so I'm going to read this. It's called The Fisherman and the Businessman. Has anybody heard this before? Fisherman and the Businessman? No? Somebody, you may have heard it by the time you get to the end. One day, a fisherman was lying on a beautiful beach with his fishing pole propped up in the sand and his solitary line cast out into the sparkling blue surf. He was enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun and the prospect of catching a fish. About that time, a businessman came walking down the beach, trying to relieve some of the stress of his workday. He noticed the fisherman sitting on the beach and decided to find out why this fisherman was fishing instead of working hard to make a living for himself and provide for his family. "You aren't going to catch many fish that way," said the businessman to the fisherman. "You should be working rather than lying on the beach." The fisherman looked up at the businessman and smiled and replied, "And what will my reward be?" "Well, you can get bigger nets and catch more fish," was the businessman's answer. "And then what will my reward be?" asked the fisherman, still smiling. The businessman replied, "You'll make money and you'll be able to buy a boat, which will then result in larger catches of fish." "And then what will my reward be?" asked the fisherman again. The businessman was beginning to get a little irritated by the fisherman's questions. "Well, you can buy a bigger boat, hire some people to work for you," he said. "And then what will my reward be?" repeated the fisherman. The businessman was getting angry. "Don't you understand? You can build up a fleet of fishing boats, sail all over the world and let all your employees catch fish for you." Once again, the fisherman asked, "And then what will my reward be?" The businessman was red with rage and shouted at the fisherman, "Don't you understand that you can become so rich that you will never have to work for your living again? You can spend all the rest of your days sitting on this beach, looking at the sunset. You won't have a care in the world." And the fisherman, still smiling, looked up and said, "And what do you think I'm doing right now?" And one of the things that I love about that story is that actually it's about contentment. We don't know from the story whether the fisherman is really wealthy and is able to do that as a result of the wealth, but what we do know is that he's content with what he's got. And I think that's something that I'd love to have a kind of us think about as we go into this first breakout discussion. It's about what does it mean to be content, whether we've got lots or whether we've not got a lot in terms of our finances. So if we break into groups of 3, 4, we'll give it about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back together for the next bit.
Cool.
Anybody else want to chip in anything that you came discussed in that session? Yeah, Ben.
We had a chat about, we were very honest about where we're content right now with where we're at. And what was interesting was that actually for the most part we were, but then there is a level of anxiety about the future. So in our group it was yeah, we're okay right now, but then when we start projecting to 20 years down the line, our children growing up, that kind of stuff, that's when then there's a level of anxiety that comes in.
Yeah. Anybody else resonate with? Yeah.
I think linked to that, I was saying like it's the finding contentment with where you're at, but particularly at the minute, or certainly in maybe this sort of age and stage, like might be age and stage of life, I don't know, that things have changed so quickly that you find contentment with what you're kind of like, okay, I finally made a budget work, or whatever that looks like, and something is thrown at you that has to become a greater financial priority, because, I don't know, otherwise you might lose your home or something. And so I think it's that adjustment, because you just about get to grips with it, and then you're like, how do I constantly have peace with it feeling like an ever-changing tide at the moment?
Yeah.
Like you have a foundation for sure, on a very practical, like financial level. But you know, that constant fluctuation of outgoings, incomings changing is quite scary.
Yeah, that's really important. I mean, I think about the fact that it was a special offering today. We had, I won't go into details, but we had a slightly frustrating thing happen over a few days ago in terms of our own finances. But actually, the fact that in our minds coming to that special offering, not to be derailed by something that's come up that might have thrown you off or make you feel more anxious, I think is quite important. At the same time, being stewarding your finances well, so not being flippant about it. It's a tension, isn't it? And particularly,
100%.
I think in a place like London where even the very basic costs of living are quite significant in terms of the level. That's something that we've got to be ever aware of. Maybe one more contribution. Anything else? Or should we move on? Pete.
We also talked about the idea that once you start to see money as something you've been given, that it's not yours, and you're actually managing it for someone, it starts to change the way you look at it quite a bit. Because then it's this idea, well, if it all belongs to God, and that is part of the kingdom of heaven, and that's what the kingdom of heaven is, it all belongs to God, then suddenly the amount that you're given to manage right now, that you have to manage right now, it doesn't seem nearly so isolating, like it's my individual money and this is all I've got, and this is all it's actually it's literally a commonwealth. It's like a kingdom, and there's something in that, I think, that is easily forgotten. But actually, if you think it's not yours and it all belongs to Him, then it starts to change the way that you think about it, and then the way that you use it.
Yeah. No, that's great, thanks Pete. I mean, in many ways there's a clue in the title of the series, which is Stewarding Heaven's Finances. And it's that word stewarding, I think we use, where it's, stewarding is I guess, owning or taking ownership or supporting something that isn't yours, on behalf of somebody else. And so we'll look at the parables and tackles later on. I'm going to hand over to Tanika. We're going to move on to the next section now. So that was money. The next one, next biblical foundation we'll look at is giving.
Yeah, great. So, giving. We are such a generous church. Just what we give to each other, and then wider. I think we're really good at this, actually. I feel like maybe we're entering into a season where actually people are going to be earning a lot more as well. So I think this is why it's helpful just to have a review what's going on. Some people are going to be struggling more. We've got people in the church that are earning more as well. We need to be aware of the needs within the church. So this is such an important topic. How do we help each other? But also there's people around us that need as well. It's good to think about giving in terms of time, skills, gifts. It's not just about money, although in this context, that's what we're focusing on. But it is everything. So, someone may not have a lot of money, but maybe you give a lot of your time, which is so valuable to the kingdom as well. And just a bit about my background. So I'm first generation born here, so my parents were immigrants to this country. So in many respects, they were starting off in very much survival mode when they came here. So maybe some of the things that I would have learned about saving and all that stuff, I didn't have that growing up, but what I did have was a very rich spiritual inheritance. And to be honest, that trumps everything, doesn't it? Just that knowledge in Jesus. So it's just important to have that foundation. Actually, sometimes we might not have a lot that we're physically giving to others or to our children, but actually when you give them that spiritual inheritance in Christ, that just trumps everything. So we'll look at 2 Corinthians 9, verse 7. And it says, each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. We got that up on... I'll just go through that and then we'll have a little menti moment in a minute. So with this verse, it's saying we should give in proportion to what God has given us. It's not sort of saying you need to give this percentage. It's what has God laid on your heart to give. So in that sense, it is a personal, God, what would you like me to give? You've given me this much, what should I give out of that? Some of us might feel called to, be giving 20%, 30%. Some of us, it's 5% in the season. God knows your heart, and it's very much your heart. Are you giving cheerfully? Are you taking it before the Lord? Are you giving in faith? And what I love about when you give, it can create a hole in what, just like what James is saying, something has come up this week, but they still felt stirred to give today. I mean, that is faith. Knowing that you are creating a gap somewhere, you've decided not to put it on this bill, or buying clothes, or whatever it is, you've decided to give to someone else. I think God really honours that. It might not come back in the way that you expect. God just sometimes surprises you and gives you in different ways. And sometimes it's like he will fill that gap and double it. So we just need to take it before the Lord, give faithfully, and God honestly will provide our every need. The other principle about giving is giving in love. So another verse in Corinthians, it says, if I give away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burnt, but I have not love, I gain nothing. So again, our giving is really about our heart towards God, his heart towards us. It's all about love, and out of that place, we give in love to others as well, because we just want to bless them. Another principle in giving is we should give in secret. And just from a really simple point of view, sometimes when you give, you want people to know that you're generous. Do you know what I mean? But giving in secret, God sees what you do, and nobody else needs to know about it. What's wonderful, though, is when we hear testimonies of people who've been on the receiving end of someone's generosity, and it does stir something up in you. You're just like, oh, I want to give like that. And you just see the effects that generosity has on other people. So in Matthew 6, verse 2 to 5, it says, thus when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, that they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And I'll just share a few stories that I've seen across the church. There have been people who have helped others with a deposit to buy a house. There have been people who have paid for someone to finish off their schooling. There's been urgent medical care needed within the wider church family, and someone has just met that need, paying for private healthcare so they could get well. And we don't know who it is, but you're just like, there's so much generosity stirred amongst us, and we just want to fan that into flame. God really loves it when we help each other like that. It's such a demonstration of the gospel when we do that. Other people look on and they're just like, wow, what is this? And it's pointing to Jesus. And personally, Rich and I think one of the biggest ways I've been blessed in Rev is, after having children, and you barely do anything, and then people are just bringing you meal after meal after meal, and you're just like, wow, it's sacrificing their time, skill, and money to bless you. It's overwhelming. So yeah, we just want to encourage you all to continue doing it. We will have a testimony from Beneliga in a minute, but just a bit of a review with everybody. How often do you review your giving? Is it something you do annually, or I don't know? How often do you guys review, or how do you go about doing that?
How do you mean to me? Like,
So when you review what to give to people or to the church,
Oh.
like what's the sort of frequency that you think about doing that, or
it's just
how does that feature?
as he's leisure. Like, it's a day by day thing. There's
Yeah.
like I think there's like, I think for me and Laura, there's definitely a discipline thing, which is like a routine which you kind of periodically okay. But that's this idea of like what the people say. And that's a just you live in that.
Mhm.
Like, for us.
Yeah, I think we have a similar, in our monthly budget, we put aside an amount of money every month, which that number itself is reviewed every however many months. And then that money, you know, it's like a pot of money that we're not trying to accrue. That should be, well, there's obviously a need around us, so God, you know, that's something to be prayerful about. What can we be giving to? Because you don't want money to just be sitting there for that. So I think that's how, practically, that's how it works out for us. And so then if you come across something or God just moves you, then you can talk about it and be like, okay, yeah, let's skip to this or that or whatever.
Anyone else? What I love about that is intentionality with both of you. So the theme was we asked God, what does he want us to do? So that is definitely a sense of a daily kind of God, who do you want us to bless today? And I love that what you were saying as well, Shreya, is just setting aside something so that you can allow God to just prompt you throughout the month as well. God, who can we give whatever it is to? So that's really good. Benaniga, can you?
Want to come in?
Yeah, if that's
all right,
okay.
yeah.
The comings up.
Richard said no.
Yeah.
Afternoon, everyone. Liga's come as well, but she told me I'm doing all the talking. We've been asked to talk just for about 5 minutes on how God has blessed us with money through our married life. I think there's kind of 3 key things that we would just like to share. One is just about pride and receiving, a spirit of poverty, and how God's generosity has been like a thread through our lives. So we lived in Latvia when Liga was first married. When Liga was first married. He was a bad guy in a nutshell. No, when we first got married. And I mean, we lived on next to nothing. We were eating sweet corn at dinner time, and that was our whole meal. We'd go out for a plate of mashed potato, and that was a treat. So we started there, and then we moved to England. We had children. We were on benefits. I was a teaching assistant, and we were just kind of really finding our way. And at that time, I think less Liga, but certainly I carried a lot of pride. And I didn't grow up in a family that talked about money. So for me, the idea of ever asking for help was just totally unacceptable. But even worse was the idea of then accepting help. But circumstance would just keep knocking on that door. You know, you'd be getting to the point where it's like, we don't have money for rent. And then somebody would hear about it, or anonymously through our old church or through this church, somebody would just give us some money, and it'd be like, God just saying, "Nanny, you've got to accept this."
I mean, I remember one time walking through alleyway with Mila in a buggy and pregnant with Stella. We literally we were lacking £250 to pay the rent. It just wasn't there. And me just walking through and saying, I'm completely lost with this. I don't know how I'm going to do this. And you feel so humbled in that and so ashamed that you don't have enough for such a fundamental need. And in that moment, I still remember being so fundamentally loved and also convicted by God. I remember his voice so clearly saying, you cannot put your trust in a bank account. You have to put your trust in me. And money is a funny thing because it's a physical thing, but it's a spiritual thing, right? So I remember thinking, but it needs to translate into something. And it was literally like that evening I came home and a job that I didn't expect came in, and it was £250. And I think that's been kind of the picture of our lives all throughout. He's always met our needs in terms of just what we needed. So just add to that.
Yeah, and I think the important thing there is that Liga's self-employed. So, and that's been a big one for us, is that, you know, you get into the point where it's like, we don't have enough, and then a job will come through. for what we need. We're at the point now where God's blessed both of us with careers that have moved on. We have a much more steady income. But I think what was big for us, and particularly me, was that God was breaking down in me that pride. And now if somebody offers me something and I know that they're offering it out of a spirit of love, I'm going to accept it. Because that's them. God's moved on them. And who am I to then say, no, I'm not going to take that from you, God. And if I don't need that, well then God can ask me to then give it somewhere else. So that thread of just generosity, God's spirit, and I think also when we were both less mature than we are now, it's easy when people give you money also to then not count that as God. You know, oh, they must have heard about this from someone else and then they've given the money, so that's just someone helping me out, that's just charity. And it's like, no, God works through people, and he works through that generosity. And I think the last one for us, and I think it's one, if I'm honest, that we're still working on, is just fighting against the spirit of poverty. I grew up in a council house. I mean, my mum and dad are okay now, but it was always that idea that we don't have, and it was just like kind of like, there was just, I remember with my mum and dad, if they were ever arguing, it was cash, it was money. And so I know, like, over our family as we were growing up, there was just like a kind of spirit of poverty, like you're always going to be in this situation. And God's moving us out of that. But I think that's something just as a church that we need to be aware of, that there are people who are under this burden that I'm always going to be poor. I'm never going to be somebody who's going to own a house, or I'm never going to be somebody who can bless others. So that's definitely something that we've had to battle with. But I think it's a good one for us for a church to be aware of. So yeah, God has blessed us, and that's the thread through our married life, that when we haven't had enough, he's provided. And just like many of you here, you know, he moves our heart and we're able to give. And when we didn't have cash, we were able to give, as Tanika said, in time.
And you were planning also, like what you were mentioning about through our journey with finances. There have been many times when we made lots of mistakes, when we didn't use money wisely, even when we didn't have it. And it would be, the natural way would be think, okay, because we weren't wise with what you gave us, you will punish us for that. And so we'll be lacking. God has showed us his nature of just being such incredible provider and giver, even in those moments when we failed and made mistakes. So he's made it that it's not actually about us, it's about our hearts and him in that and how he wants to bless. So what I'm trying to say is often we can be harsh with us saying, oh, I don't deserve this because I failed or I haven't been wise, but that's not God's heart. So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was, that's really, really encouraging and insightful. God gives as he wills, and the thing is, growing up I saw a lot of people working hard, and just because of the jobs that they've chosen, just means they're not necessarily going to earn a lot. So I just wanted to make the point again, sometimes it's not necessarily about a work ethic thing, it's just this is the job that you have and this is how much it pays. And this is why as a church, together, there's something beautiful that really happens when we think communally about our jobs, about the money that we have, and just think, actually, if you've got excess, there's other people that will need it. And just asking God, who can I bless? If I've got something a bit extra, whatever it is, small, large, God, who can I bless? I think that heart amongst us is just really important to continue cultivating. And it is important to note, we will always have people in lack and need. Even if you've got a lot of money, there'll be a gap there that you need filling. And there will be people amongst us that will need support or are not called to have a lot of money. That's okay. I think, again, this is all about the heart. What has God called you to? How are you being faithful stewards of what he's given you? So I just wanted to highlight that point. So let's talk together about 2 Corinthians 9 verse 7. If we just mull over this verse together, how does it look like for you giving according to this verse? So if we just gather together in groups, you can mix up if you want to, but yeah, twos, threes, fours. We'll give you 5 minutes just to discuss amongst yourselves. Can I have a few people that just maybe want to feedback a few bits that you discussed in your groups?
Maybe discuss a little bit about when you are giving directly to a person, whether they be someone on the street or a friend or someone in the church, you can do that cheerfully because it's very sort of direct and you can do it from the heart. But maybe struggling a little bit with like the monthly tithing, as it were, because it can be coming from a bank account, transfer, something like that. You do try to, but it can feel like a disconnect. So it can be a bit like small. It feels more like a duty. Like, you've got to give roughly 10%, something like that. It's like a duty to, rather than I'm doing this cheerfully. So it can be where that can be a bit difficult.
Yeah, that is a really good point. In this sort of modern world, because I remember growing up, you know, put the offering basket in, so it's very much, and people would literally dance around the church to put their offering in. But there was something in that, because you're physically telling your body, yes, I really want to give. So when it's coming out of your bank account, yeah, it's just not the same, is it? Let's be honest. But what Rich and I try and do is, you know, when the offering pot comes around at church, we, you know, try and consciously actually, Lord, we know it's coming out. We give it before you, let your will be done. Do you know what I mean? Taking those moments to consciously say, yeah, it's coming out as a standing order, but we're giving cheerfully, and it's really intentional. And I think that thing of review as well, sometimes you've had a pay increase. That might be a good point to think, can we give a little bit more? And sometimes it actually goes the other way, which has happened to us as well, particularly when I was on maternity leave. And it's like, oh, this is actually not quite working in the season. So, you know, it's not a static, this is just what we give. It's, Lord, you know, maybe you're giving us a bit more, but less, what are you calling us to do in this season?
I also think that we can all get a bit influenced maybe by what others do or how frequently others review their giving or in a position to review their giving in the sense of, you know, there's a change. But I think it's good to still review, but like think about what else you can do. So going back to that time, I don't know, like whatever it looks like, and actually being in a place of like, well, I financially can't adjust what I'm doing, or yes, I might have had a pay increase, but something, you know, I've got bigger bills or something. But actually like, okay, do I have time in the week where I can release somebody in my GC to always be able to go to GC for me, it's like for someone to go as a couple or go and do things when people ask to babysit, that's like an example, or giving time doing something else. So I think it is important to remember that we have riches in other places, and it's good that we can actually draw on that, because I think the amount of blessing it gives to some people is very underrated by others of us who are maybe very bogged down with finances.
Absolutely. And we have been a beneficiary of your babysitting.
Why did I know she'd say
that? Is worth its weight in gold. Yeah, Jane?
So Stewarding, well, first what we were talking about was kind of related to what Jamie was saying, that it can feel really easy to give very cheerfully when there's like some sort of personal attachment to the personal situation. Say it's like a family member or like a really good friend, but when it's something. Maybe like it's a stranger or like you don't really know so well. How can I really commit to that? But also on the thing of tithing as well. It's something that I kind of grew up with. For me, I really enjoy it actually. Every single month after I'm paid, that I sit in my bed. And I just really thank God for what came that month, and I'm like, God, I'm going to give I'm going to give this 10% to you, and just like really pray over it. And I really look forward to doing that. Just being as you're saying, just being very, very, very conscious about something that I do that every single month, and I've done that for a long time, even when I was barely earning anything. I do like a summer job. I still just had kind of kept that. I've always kept that going, no matter how much or how little it was, and that's always been such a blessing to me. And I really I just like that, being very, very conscious about it, praying over it, reading some kind of proclaiming verses over it and stuff. But being very conscious is so important. And praying over it is good, that it goes into the right place as well.
Yeah, you've really taught me something there actually. I don't think I've heard anyone say that before. That's brilliant. So yeah, that gratitude as to what comes in, I think that is so good, and I'm going to start doing that as well. So yeah, and yeah, no, I think that is just that's really really good. Yeah, just thanking Jesus. Actually, thank you for what you blessed us with, and that is a brilliant place to start with the giving as well. Okay, thank you guys, and we're going to hand over to James for savings.
Amazing. I've got some good news. Menti is up and running. Right, hold on. So if you head to your devices, menti.com. I'm going to have to
it's organised and closed up now.
There we go.
What's the code?
Code is 6453 3172. Now this would not have worked. 3172. 6453 3172. Now this wouldn't have worked in person because obviously show of hands is very exposing, whereas this is all anonymous. But you might think this is a personal question, and it is a personal question if you to ask somebody direct. But one of the reasons we wanted to do this was because we actually wanted to just get a flavour amongst ourselves who has savings, who doesn't have savings, because I think this is what it's like in terms of living in community and being able to see where the need is. And what we can see already is that there's a significant number. I mean, it's 20. We've probably got 25 people in the room. There's a lot of people that would say they've got savings of some sort. I didn't say how much, but there's a lot of savings here. But there's also need here. And I think that's really important. You could do this across the whole church, and you could find out a whole lot about where you are as a church in terms of finances, even if you can follow the details. So I just want us to think about this, and we've got a similar thing coming up later around investing as well. So that's the Menti moment. Give it up for the Menti moment. I'm going to go back to the slides. So we're going to head to. So this section is on saving. I'm just going to read from Genesis 41. A snippet on the screen because I couldn't fit the whole thing in the box. Let Pharaoh proceed to appoint overseers over the land and take 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt during the 7 plentiful years. And let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh for food in the cities, and let them keep it. That food shall be a reserve for the land against the 7 years of famine that are to occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land may not perish through the famine. And so the context of this obviously is Joseph interpreting the dream that Pharaoh has had about what do these skinny old cows mean, and all of that, which we might know either if we've read the story in the Bible or we've seen Joseph in the multicoloured dream coat. But in terms of some of the other context that goes beyond this, because I think if you're doing a little bit of reading about you do a quick Google of what scriptures talk about saving, this is one that comes up. But actually, if you read past this immediate piece of scripture, what actually happens is that Joseph later then goes and opens the storehouses and is able to sell to all of the known world all the stuff that has been saved in that period. So there's very much the saving aspect for the need, but also there's an investment for the future that comes. And so I think that's an important thing to think of. Saving isn't just about hoarding. In fact, it isn't about hoarding. It's not. Saving is a form of investment. And so I think it's important to think about, if you are saving, what are you saving for? Why are you saving? Are you saving for yourself, for your family, for friends, for other needs, or for what God might bring to you? Wes was saying about daily seeking God for what it is that he's saying. And I think that's the context in which we should be thinking around saving. We're going to head straight into discussion for this part, and we're going to spend another 5 minutes with one question, or 2 questions I think, and then I've got a bonus question I'm going to throw in for free. So the first question is, what is your approach to savings? And the second one is, how are you planning for the future financially? Now, I appreciate that, this potentially can be quite exposing. So in the small groups that you're in, please feel free to engage with these questions as you feel comfortable. We're not going to look at this in a bigger group, and we might kind of pick up a few key highlights and things. But I want us to just kind of get talking about money within the small group in a healthy way. And then the kind of bonus question is, if you don't have savings, or if you've got very limited savings, are there ways that you could start to save if you would like to? I've talked to a number of people over many years, kind of just, I've always been really interested in finances and things like that. And a lot of people might not have savings and might really love to be able to save, but maybe don't feel that they can save. And I think actually opening up the conversation is a really important part of that. So if that's you, question is, are there ways that you could start to save, even if it's a little? So yeah, get into groups. Feel free to stick with the same groups that you've got if that's helpful, and we'll come back in 5 minutes. So giving, where giving is the first thing that comes out of your account, as opposed to this is what I've got left over after bills, so this is what I'll give, or this is what I'll save. So it's that idea of I guess, demonstrating where the commitment is in your finances. Is important. Brilliant. So we're going to head over to the next one. Tanika's going to lead us around investing, but we've got another Menti moment for you. Bear with me. So head over to menti.com. Got a new code for you. No, I got a whole bunch here because I haven't got a premium account. Right, so I'll have to create all these seven stuff. So this code is 5971074. Ignore me. Ignore me completely.
Never completely.
What is going on?
There we go. Right, there's a new one here. 22678786. I won't believe I do this my job. Right, have you ever invested your money in something to generate a financial gain?
Yes. I forgot.
It's one definition, so it's a good question. So the purpose of this question is to just get a flavour among this group whether we've ever invested in something. And I want to be, the reason why we've kind of put this specific definition is as opposed to investing my time or investing in a myriad different ways. Specifically investing in, for example, things like stock shares, investing in housing, investing in whatever it might be, but something where the purpose of the investment is to generate a financial gain as opposed to anything else. So very interesting with this one, I'm going to hand over to Nika to lead us through in terms of some of the scriptural context. This is much more split, which is possibly unsurprising, but yeah, much more split in terms of people that might have had a go at investing or maybe be seasoned investors, but then some people might not at all. And one of the things we're going to be doing next month for session 2 is we're going to be looking at some of the practical details of the things we've been looking at today, one of which is investing. Because anecdotally, I know lots of people...
2267.
Same with you guys, where we've talked to people about investing, and actually it can seem something that's kind of over there. That's not something that I would ever kind of feel that is for me, or that's for people that have got lots of money. But actually, investing for financial gain can be for anybody with little or a lot, and we'll have a look at that in more detail next week. But Tanika, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, this section is very exciting because it's a new area for me. I'm going to give you a bit of a story again because I'm learning and I'm still trying to gain wisdom in this area, but I want to pass on what Rich and I have been learning. So I think when, again, early years of marriage, we were just like, why save? And again, we had that rainy day sort of, why are we saving for a rainy day? We believe in Jesus. He will be our sunshine kind of thing. And we honestly were that simplistic. So when we earned, we would basically, our money would, generous to the church, spend it on experiences, and we just didn't feel comfortable with saving and investing, because for us it sort of tied into this lack of trust in God. And we were like that for a while. When we had kids and my earnings dropped because I was on a maternity sort of wage, I think for them it started crystallising for me. There's merit in planning, and there's wisdom in planning. So, I wish I kind of learned that before, but anyway, God's taken us through the journey, miraculously has provided in so many ways. So this is why I'm so thankful for the journey as well, because actually we've had opportunities for God to really teach us how to trust him in every situation and provide contentment in every situation. At the same time, there's so much wisdom that the Bible has to help us. And I think sometimes when we're able to plan, we're then able to actually give more as well. So in terms of investing, this is essentially looking at things like stocks and shares, I think, or property or pensions. We became accidental landlords and we couldn't sell our flat about 10 years ago. So we accidentally had an asset that was generating income for us, and that wasn't our plan, but we just couldn't sell it. But again, over the years, when my income dropped from my job, we actually had that income coming in. So that actually really helped us in that time. And it's experiences like that. I've seen how God can use these vehicles to help you live. You don't always have to exchange your physical time to have an income coming in. So there is wisdom in that. In terms of stocks and shares, again, I looked at my pension a couple of years ago and I suddenly realised, this has grown quite a bit. And it's only because I was sort of automatically enrolled at work, wasn't really conscious of this, 3% that was going into this pot. And 15 years later, you've actually grown it into something. And then now I'm thinking, I'm in my 40s now, thinking, okay, what does it look like? When I'm a bit older, maybe I don't want to work, maybe I want to give my time somewhere else. What does it look like if you have a pot there, you've got an income coming in that can actually release you to other things? So it's just food for thought. It's not as scary as it sounds, and that's what I've learned over the last few years. I'm going to ask Rich to read a scripture for us. Matthew.
From Matthew 25, verse 14 to 13. For it would be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time, the master of the servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown, and gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him, and give it to him who has the 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But for the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness, in that place where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.
Okay, so this parable that Jesus spoke about to me, really crystallises that idea of what investing, the principle investing. God will give, maybe 10, maybe 5, maybe 1. It's not the amount, it's really what are we doing with it. And again, we can look at this in terms of time, in terms of your gifts, in terms of money. So it's not just money we're talking about. It's that sense of intentionality and purpose to what you're doing. It is that sense of actually God, valuing what God's given you and sowing it into His kingdom. So that's the principle. There's so much to unpack with this. So I think the main thing that I would want you to take away is be really conscious about what God's given you and be really intentional about where you're sowing what He's given you. I think as well, don't bury what God's given you. So what we noticed about the last servant, he said he was afraid. And I think, again, this subject, it has the ability to ignite fear in us. And I've certainly felt that in times as well. So we've got to start from a place of trusting in God with this as well. It's like, you are our provider. And out of that place, make our decisions. But this servant said he was afraid, so he hid. So I think there is a real call on us Christians to be full of faith, fearing God, not man. And from that place, He will give us the wisdom that we need. So how do we multiply what you have given us? And again, it's knowing actually the multiplication comes from God. So I think if we're asking God, He'll show us what to do. And then just a few principles around that as well is seeking wise counsel. So, this is why I love talking to Christians about this. I can talk to lots of other people and there's lots of information you can get, but actually talking to other Christians about this is so important because they will get the need to pray first. They'll get the need for faith-filled decisions that sometimes look foolish. So seek wise counsel amongst us. We've got a lot of different expertise in Rev. So it's drawing amongst brothers and sisters and that accountability with each other as well, just making sure our hearts remain just right before God. James is really good at this bit, and I need to look into it more, but all your investments are you make sure they're ethical and sustainable, and just finding out ways that what you're putting your money into is good. One way that I sort of grappled with investing in the stock market, to me, I was like, is it gambling?
Yes.
And that's what I think I've really, we were just like, we don't want to gamble. But for me, one thing that broke it down for me, if you purchase a phone, that phone has a brand. You have spent X amount of money every month, or you've paid for it outright, you've put your money into that. So for me, it's owning a bit of those companies that actually you're already paying money to. So if you think it's okay to purchase from those brands, presumably, what's the difference then in owning a bit of the company and actually getting a return from it? So for me, that just broke it down really simply to understand it's not just throwing your money here and hoping, we're going to get a windfall. It's really not about that. It's about sowing intentionally into places where actually you're already putting your money, you're just not getting anything back for it. So hopefully that's a helpful breakdown. There's a lot more to say, and that's why we did this in 3 sessions, because there is a lot to unpack, and we're still learning as well. So I will happily take feedback on this section. Proverbs 16:8, better is a little with righteousness than great revenues with injustice. And again, God loves the humble heart. This is not about wealth accumulation. It really is about stewardship of God's resources. So personally, I'd rather have little, and I'm saying this before God, I'd rather have little, humbly, that God blesses me, than accumulating wealth that has nothing to do with the gospel. I'm not interested in that. It's like, God, whatever you've blessed me with, I will humbly receive that and steward it as well as I can. So let's take a little moment to discuss together, because this is quite a practical section. So if we, again, as James was saying, just as you feel comfortable, because it's such a personal, private, taboo subject in some respects, but as you see fit, please discuss together. Have you ever invested your money in something to generate a financial gain? If so, what has your experience been? And if not, is this something you would be interested in? So we've got about 5 minutes to discuss that. Yes, if that's okay. And Pete, sorry. If you guys want to come to the front, if you don't mind.
Can you grab the chairs?
Grab the chairs.
Bring your seat.
This is the kind of final section. For the eagle-eyed people in the room, I've skipped over the whole section, which is around budgeting, which is my favourite thing actually, so it's slightly tragic. But we wanted to give these guys as much time as possible so that we can try and wrap up by 3:30, which is I think when we've got the space to. So we will have a look at budgeting more practically next time, and there's just a call out for those that are interested in budgeting, never done it before, and would like to find out more information. Following the next session, we'll get a flavour for who that might be. We'll then do a separate kind of Zoom call if anybody wants to find out a little bit more about my own personal budgeting spreadsheet. So in terms of Pete, you're in the way of the word discussion. So this next bit is a little bit different. Sorry that I'm in the way. I'm not supposed to sit down. No, because I've got another slide. I've got another slide. Questions?
Sorry, I've already been trying to know.
Oh, sorry, Shreya, forget the slide. I'll just show you so you can see it. It's a nice little diagram. So this is kind of the final bit of today. What we wanted to do is we wanted to put together a stellar panel that are made up of people that have got lots to share about their own kind of journey with finances. Got some people with kids, some people that are nearing retirement, and so on and so forth. So it's hopefully we'll get a really great varied discussion. And we've put a couple of questions to these people before, so that hopefully I have a bit of time to think. And it's a bit of an unusual question. Which would be on screen. So the question is, what goals, plans and dreams do you have for your finances? And the reason why it's unusual is that, particularly in British culture, which is very varied, it's not that common to talk about money, and it's not very common often to talk about money, as Christians, in terms of what do you dream about financially. That seems quite a strange question. And the reason why we wanted to ask this question is we wanted to get a flavour from cross-section of people in the church. Do you have goals financially? Do you have dreams? What are they? Are they very, very simple? Are they very, very complex? Are they very short-term, very long-term? We wanted to basically just open up to discussion. And then the second question is, with all of that, and what comes out of that first question is, how can we trust God daily to meet our needs? So whether you've got a 10-year plan, or a 10-minute plan, whatever it is, how do we trust God in the day-to-day to meet those things? So we'll kick things off. Wes, nearest to Mike.
I sat here to be slightly other.
First question, what goals, plans and dreams do you have for your finances?
Well, I had a dream the other week that I had a house with a swimming pool. But I can't swim, so I don't know what that was about. But I think...
That's what you learn.
Yeah, that's fun. But I think, I was talking to Kathy Martin about this a minute ago, about the thing of like comfort. And that's something I go, oh, that'd be nice, because it makes you comfortable. I think in terms of goals and dreams, I don't think me and Laura have goals and dreams with money. We just don't think in that. We just don't think like that. I guess it's making the month work or the week work. Personally, my perspective, or the kind of my line of sight in kind of money is quite immediate. I've always worked jobs that we pay daily or weekly, and so to plan a monthly, so Laura's income is monthly, so that kind of makes sense to me. But my day-to-day, my income comes up or down, and so that's yeah, sort of vision-wise, it kind of it brings things much nearer. And so to think beyond, so in the recent couple of years we started thinking about pension. Well, I was enrolled in a pension at the job I had once, and so that's just carried on the habit that, oh, it's probably good to do that, until someone said, no, it's probably not, but I just went, oh, I don't know what to do, so I'll just buy this if we can afford to keep some money there. Don't own a home, so we rent, and so in terms of financial planning, the line I always had, everything I touch turns to mould rather than gold. So I just don't have that kind of aptitude to making money grow in your sort of traditional sense of financial investments and respect. So I think our kind of there's a sense of trying to navigate that or have some kind of planning involved in, look, it would be lovely if God bless us with long life, but the reality of that is, especially the way things are today and looking beyond today, is that's going to be a challenge in terms of housing and all that kind of stuff. We're into a season where, you know, if we haven't got much of a pension, which we won't have, what does that look like? So we've had lots of children. So there's some future and goals and planning in there, you know. We've got all Abrahamic there. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Reminding me. But yeah, no, bless them. So, and there's this kind of, I think culturally we talk about not tell me to shut up if I need to shut up. Culturally we kind of talk about, like, you know, not being a burden to your children or not putting yourself. And we have this kind of the culture that I've grown up in has a thing of a bit of a complex about the individual, the autonomous, the I'll sort myself out. This Ben, you were saying same kind of feeling with me of like, no, there's a pride and a dignity in looking after yourself and providing for your own, and this challenges cuts across some of that, really, doesn't it? You know, it does, and I think definitely. So you're a freelancer, self-employed, right? Same with me, self-employed. You don't have, there's not a predictability of things, and so you kind of, that immediacy affects how you plan and your kind of goals and vision. It just does not, in some ways that's not a thing, you know? And it's like I say, in recent sort of 2 or 3 years, probably through the COVID thing, kind of went, oh, okay, it would help to have some eggs in other baskets, with other things going on. There's been, in terms of investment, I've kind of done some professional development, I guess you'd call it, education and training and that kind of stuff, to try and diversify an income. I mean, the way I've always had an income is through a job, you know, and so that's where money comes from the time that you spend working for someone, or, you know, self-employed, whatever it is, and that's what comes in goes out. So I think that probably in a roundabout way answers that question. That was just the one question. But I'm going to shut up because I've gone on enough.
I read the question wrong, sorry. I thought it was goals, plans and values, so I made some notes. It does answer the rest of the question. Okay, but I thought the first one that was important, it doesn't apply to everyone, was when Brooke and I got married, it was to hold true to becoming one, our finances are one, and that feels like an important value. So we've got little kids now, and I'm not earning anything, but that's not changed the dynamic of our marriage. It's still our money, and it comes into one account and all of that, and that's probably the biggest value around money that we have. The other benefit of that is that it just we come from different backgrounds, and I think one of us would err on the side of accruing money, and one would err on the side of rapidly giving it away. And so actually we've been able to meet, not in the middle, but just ask the question, well, what does Jesus say about this? And that's been really helpful. The second thing is money is not an asset, and I think this is one that's been, it's taken me time to learn, I think. It's not an asset, it's, like what Pete said earlier, we're stewarding something that belongs to someone else, and so that does change the way that we spend it, and we're very budgety people. Brooke loves a spreadsheet. And so that's been really helpful, is actually this is not about what we like to spend on first, it's about what does he like to spend on. And that ties to the goals and dreams. So our financial goals and dreams just tend to take shape around what God is asking of us and what the things that we feel he's called us to. And that, whether that's, going without an income to pursue something that God has asked of us, or having some idea that we'd like to have a space at some point, and even in the day-to-day, like with GC or whatever, that if we feel called to a gift of hospitality, how are we living that out? How are we putting our money into that? So that's the first part of that. The second part of that is that money, because it's not just about, it's not ours, it's also, it's a means to an end, and so it exposes a lot of what's going on in our hearts, and has over the last 8 years exposed areas of vulnerability or areas of strength. In our budget, like if we put aside an amount of money that we feel like, okay, this is an important thing to put money into, and then we consistently either spend too much on it or we don't spend enough, then it's asked the question of like, well, what's going on here? We both agreed that this is what God says about, whatever budget line, and why are we not holding true to what we think God has said? And it starts a conversation, and we can just, it makes us come back to ask what's going on there. Or another example that I did think it was worth saying was when I was pregnant with our first, Naaman, and the whole kind of worms about maternity and work and da-da-da, and actually there's not a right answer for everyone, but I know that for me, leaving work and like without a timeline of when I was going to come back to it was really important, and God used all of that to address my pride and how much of my self-worth and identity is tied up in how much money I'm making, and I had to just say goodbye to all of that, and then you ask, well, God, what am I worth and what is my identity? And that's been so good. I think that's really transformative. So yeah, just those are two examples of how money is just a means of God doing other things. I think by the same token, all of our giving, all of our spending really is investing in the kingdom. And I think this is why the question of, is investing property, is it stocks and shares, actually, as over our whole budget, we've tried to move away from this is our giving, which can look, in the more conventional charity or food or this or that, and to say, well, it's all investing in the kingdom. It would be really it would do God short to say that where we put our money, that's not then God's not going to use that. And so whether that's employing people or what's the word? Using certain businesses, that's all investing in God's kingdom and being more purposeful about that. And I think that's it.
Pete. Yeah. Now I will just say, because Pete and I have talked about this, and we're going to invite him back for the panel at the third time, because you could talk for hours.
We never said it'd be good.
Stuff to share, but maybe 5 minutes. Give us a flavour.
Cool. Do you want me to time it? Why not? Let's go pro.
Yeah.
So the question is, what are my plans, dreams and goals with regards to finance? Good. Just to make sure you got that. This is a very interesting question. All the way I think about this is very tied up with the idea that, as we said, the money is not mine. I am managing it for someone. And in that parable of the talents, the master goes away. Those parables I find are not the most popular of the parables. We love the Good Samaritan because we get that. And it's like, someone came alongside someone and it was all nice. And in this one, the master goes, okay, here's some stuff. I'm now going to leave. So it's this idea in life, God gives you some stuff and then leaves you with it, and he watches what you do with it. So in my head, I'm the sort of person that now that I'm more and more starting to really see things this way, I go, well, okay, so none of this money is mine. And I see money, I see a resource as a wider thing. God gives you time, God gives you all of these things. There's many areas of wealth, it's not really just about money. Money is one of them. So all of these things God has given me to manage. So then all of my goals start to then look really different. So I'm not there thinking about, am I going to have a house as such, or like, what's this going to look like, what's that going to look like? And what it's come to, what I think God's led me towards, is that I actually have no limits in my thoughts about the amount of things that I could be given to manage, which is different from the amount of money that I want, right? So I have now, especially as someone who's never who's never had a proper job, who's never had those kind of structures in life. I also have had there isn't a regular amount month to month. It comes, it goes. So I have been looking into, well, how does that work, and how can you, because it's not actually scary, because what I find happens, what you're actually doing is you're leaving God open to give you more. And then there's a very interesting bit in that parable of the talents where I never really heard anyone talk about it before, and then I heard someone talk about it, and it got me thinking about it in a really different way. Because we tend to focus on the amounts that they were given, and the overall point of it being, this is, you watch what you're doing, you want to multiply the things that God gives you, which is great. But it does also say that God gave each according to their ability. And that fascinated me. I'm still so kind of stuck on that, because this is a discussion point, right? This isn't me just saying, this is what it is, and I know all the answers. But you think about that. So God gave somebody 5 talents, and somebody 1. So then I'm going, so according to my ability. So it is actually kind of a partnership. So it is, so some of it's up to me. So my goal and my plan and my dream and my desire could be summed up in that I want to be the best manager. I want to be able to manage millions, because I think that is what, we're capable of that. God has put us in this place, in this city where it's really expensive and there's all these challenges, and God says things like, well, the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. So, do you sometimes see how, other large institutions are managing money, and you kind of go, I don't know about that, I don't know about that, it seems like the wicked's got all the money. And then, you read things like that, and does it really line up? And then, so, that's my journey. I have no limits in what God might give me to manage. So I am leaving myself open to those possibilities, because I think we actually often dumb ourselves down from thinking about it like that actually it's not ours. So it's not like a prosperity gospel where you give so that you get. It's actually, there can't be a prosperity gospel like that in a kingdom where the king owns everything. Because if the king owns everything, then we're all the same amount of wealthy, which is a fascinating idea. But then what I will end with, which I think it really brings it home for me, is that here's another discussion point, right? Not necessarily saying, I'm not preaching. They haven't, no one's endorsed this. Yeah. What was it? It's gone. That does happen. It will probably come back if it's important. We can pass on to you. I can always finish that thought.
Thanks, Pete. And Kathleen. It's very obvious that I'm the one that's just about to retire, isn't it? not rocket science. So my husband and I are retiring very, very soon, and we have our pension, and we have had over the years financial help in managing that, because I think somebody said at the beginning, you know, it's really helpful to have professional help with your money, however little or however much you've got. And I think actually the less you've got, the more you need that. So you need to make it work. But we're getting to the stage, and it's so funny when you ask me that question, what are your goals and your targets and your dreams? I was thinking, oh my goodness, I haven't even thought that. Superficially, my goal is for that pension to keep going until I die. Because if it doesn't, I'm stuck. So, you know, that was sort of my superficial, it just needs to work until then. And then the thought of thinking, oh, even at this stage of life, in the way that, you know, our finances will be, and that we won't be working for money necessarily, although, you know, who knows what might come up, the thought that I'm still allowed to have dreams as to what God might do in these next few years through our finances, that was quite... Well, I can't tell you what they're going to be because I'm only just starting to think about it. But it was so wonderful. Think, oh gosh, even at this stage of life, you know that God can still do miracles in the area of provision and things like that. And just as we keep saying it's all God's, and we're just here to steward it. Well, we want to retire so that we can be more useful to God doing stuff in the future than perhaps we are at the moment. Well, for me, that's my thing. I think I'm more used to God doing some other stuff than I am with my job at the moment, and that's partly why we're retiring. So to have dreams, this has been really quite freeing, to think, oh, I could even sort of believe God to maximise the finances so that not only are we not out on the streets, but, there can be a certain sense of blessing there as well. So, I don't know if that was it. Watch this space, really. Yeah.
I did remember we should move on. I was done. It was my 5 minutes.
Amazing. Save it. Remember, write down. Save it for next time. Thanks, guys. Second.
Can we give everybody?
Yeah, give everybody a hand. Before we go, because we are running out of time. The second question was just how. Thank you, because that was, and I think it's also a place of vulnerability sharing this, because we've talked about this maybe in smaller settings, but to talk in front of a lot of people is quite. That's not something that people do every day. So thank you. Second question was, how can we trust God daily? Just have a think about that in one sentence. We'll kind of go down the line, and then we'll wrap things up. Who wants to kick things off? One sentence, I can.
Talk to Jesus and be obedient to what he says. I think that's it. Yeah.
That's literally it. Pray and listen.
Don't be suckered into this idea that seeing money go down is a bad thing.
Remember how he's provided up until now.
Amazing. Before we wrap up, we've got a bit of homework. So hopefully you found this helpful and interesting, thought-provoking. The next session is in mid-June. I think it's the 16th. We'd love you, if you want to, if you feel comfortable, to go away and have a think about what we've just talked about here in this panel discussion. Practically speaking, maybe have a go at praying and thinking about a short-term goal with your finances, which could be 6 months. A medium-term goal, 1 year, for example. And maybe a longer-term goal, 5, 10 years, whatever else. And you might, you might spend time praying about that, and it might be that actually God reveals something very specifically in only one of those areas, or maybe none of those areas. That's totally fine. But I think the key thing with all of this is actually, just as we do with any area of our spiritual life, is to be engaging actively with this particular thing. And financial matters are just one aspect of what we're involved in. So have a go at thinking about those things, and what we'll do is we'll kick things off in the beginning of the next session for those that might want to share some of those things, and that will inform what we do in the third session, because we want to build that third session according to what comes out within this room, so that we're doing something that's helpful If we find out that nobody's interested in buying a house, or everybody's interested in this particular thing, that's what we want to make sure that third and final session of this series is as helpful as possible. So have a go, and yeah, if you've got any questions in the meantime about any of this stuff, please do come to me or to Nika, and we'd be really happy to talk to Nika about anything that's come up. Thank you very much.